Each of you has probably made discoveries that make your blood run cold. I made one of these finds and realized that my marriage was over. The fact is that my wife loved cheating on me and recorded it all on camera, and I accidentally found all these discs. 5 years ago, it all began unexpectedly when I stumbled upon the unincorporated village we named Circumstances, which now boasted a population of 349. On a stroke of luck, I had just unloaded another shipment of branded bandages in Texas that needed sterilizing before hitting the retail market. After confirming my clearance, dispatch unexpectedly issued a pickup order that would bring me home 2 days earlier. With my hazardous materials license, I was among the few qualified for the job, and the pickup location was conveniently just half an hour away. I refueled on the go and quickly loaded up, heading straight out. The drop-off point was merely an hour from home. While on the road, I double-checked the full load and realized it paid twice the standard rate. Rather than sticking to the designated route, I opted for a shortcut across the country, slashing both mileage and time. This decision put me nearly 2 hours away from home, significantly ahead of schedule by 5 to 6 hours. Approaching an intersection of 2 rural roads, I spotted a handwritten sign that read, "For sale before the county takes it," with an arrow pointing right. Curious, I followed the signs leading into a farmer's yard. The owners, an elderly couple likely in their early 70s, had retired due to their age. Though they leased their land to local farmers, rising taxes had put them in a tough spot. Attached to their farm and reluctant to move into town, they reluctantly decided to sell off a portion of their land. I phoned my dad, who took charge. Using the family trust, we bought the farm at its fair market value and arranged for them to rent the house on a long-term lease at a low rate. They were delighted and offered assistance whenever I needed it. Next, my dad cut out and set aside 10 acres at the intersection of the original 200-acre farm. It was an ideal spot for building a convenience store and gas station, given that the nearest major town was an hour's drive away. After I left, I suggested to my dad that he inspect the area and try to acquire the adjacent land around the intersection at a good price. He did, and somehow, we managed to secure 10 acres on each corner of the intersection. While searching for water, my father discovered an underground river running through the farm that could easily supply water for 50,000 people. He decided to tap into it to support our new commercial venture. Just as I arrived to deliver the shipment, there was another rush, which I happily handled. In the end, I made it home at my usual time. 6 months later, at 5 in the morning on a Wednesday, I had already delivered the load ahead of schedule. After parking the truck and trailer in the company yard, I picked up the keys to my newly painted old Ford truck from the dispatch office. I knew I would soon face scrutiny for violating state and federal driving hour regulations. Due to a breakdown, I had been on the road for 16 days, which motivated me to push hard to get home. As a result, my replacement enjoyed an extra 2 days off. The cab was scheduled for inspection and would be ready for use in a few hours, ensuring it was properly repaired. The other driver would be notified to report in and hit the road by 9 o'clock. I had promised my wife I'd be home in time for supper tonight. Marcy had already gathered the children and was eagerly anticipating my return. Some time ago, I had removed the engine from the old Ford truck due to its failure, and in my spare time, I had meticulously restored the frame and body. Before embarking on my last 2-week journey, I had prepaid a local paint shop to repaint every piece of metal, both inside and out. Once they completed reassembling the interior, Jameson's Auto Shop was to be called to pick it up. After installing the new engine and ensuring everything was in order, Jameson left the truck keys with the dispatcher, confident I would settle the bill upon my return. The fresh coat of paint transformed the old truck into what looked like a brand new vehicle. Its original red hue was now a sleek midnight black, complete with shiny new chrome bumpers. The Ford emblem on the tailgate was painted white, just as it was originally, making it eligible for collector plates if desired. I arrived home unexpectedly early, hoping to surprise my wife, who wouldn't start work until 9. Starting up the truck, I eagerly headed home, excited to reunite with my wife and our 2 daughters after a 16-day journey. As I drove down our street towards our house around 8 in the morning, I noticed a vehicle in our driveway that didn't belong there. I immediately recognized it as the pride and joy of the youngest son of the owner of our transportation company. When I was away on the road, he was absent too, since we shared the same company cab. In many ways, we were complete opposites. He had a reputation as the family's black sheep, and among truckers, he was notorious for his loud, boastful demeanor. I parked on the side of the road and observed, wanting to understand why he was at our house and where my wife's car was. My heart shattered when I saw my wife Marcy and Jack Redding exiting the house with our 2 children in front of them. Jack carried a rig bag in his right hand, the kind us drivers always carried with essentials for the road. The girls had apparently missed the school bus, so they were leaving to drop them off. I recorded a video of them using my cell phone. I captured Marcy and Jack sharing a tender moment behind the kids before loading them into the car. It was clear that whatever was happening had been going on for some time. Marcy and Jack showed no concern about being seen in public. They appeared like any other happy family. They drove past me without recognizing me, probably because Marcy didn't expect me home and my truck had been restored. I watched them in the rear-view mirror as they turned the corner. Then I drove to our 3-bedroom house, preparing myself to uncover more clues. I checked our children's bedrooms and found everything as usual. Our master bedroom was the same, with my wife's and my clothing in their places. Surprisingly, even our bed was neatly made despite the kids almost missing the bus. Nothing seemed out of order so far. If they had spent the night together, I wondered where the evidence would be. If they weren't involved, there would be no reason for him to be here. I searched through everything twice, but my intuition urged me to continue looking. Nothing stood out from the basement to the upper floors. The dishwasher was full, needing to be run. It was then that I noticed a faint light under the door leading to the unfinished 3rd floor. This struck me as odd because it shouldn't be lit up. We had hung old curtains and kept them closed, using it as storage for unused items. I hadn't been up there in years. I initially thought Marcy might have been there and forgotten to turn off the light. Curiosity drove me to investigate the source of the light under the door. Climbing the stairs, I opened the door and found the entire floor had been fully renovated. I was taken aback. The morning light was filtering through because someone had left a curtain open, a stark contrast to how we always kept them closed when I was home. The problem was that the construction of the room shouldn't even have started because my wife Marcy and I couldn't agree on what to do with it. Now I understand why. I started to have questions about who finished decorating the room and who used it. The room itself had a separate spacious bedroom, larger than ours on the ground floor, with huge walk-in closets on either side of the bathroom. There was also a separate sitting area equipped with its own TV and DVD player. On a small table, I noticed several adult films that my wife had never watched and would not let me watch. However, when I turned on the TV and pressed play on the DVD remote control, the adult video started playing. It was obvious that someone was watching it. I was shocked to discover that this is a home video of my wife cheating on me. It saddened me because it was something she had never done for me. I was really surprised to see how much pleasure my wife seemed to get from it. Across the room on a coffee table, there was a handmade postcard with the inscription, "We love you, Uncle Jake," signed by my 2 children. I felt sick. My worst fears have become reality. Not only was he my wife's lover, but it seems they were also trying to take my children away from me. The large bed had clearly been slept in and left unmade. On the floor were new baby dolls I hadn't seen before, suggesting she had been in a hurry this morning. The bedroom smelled of intimacy. While inspecting the walk-in closets, I found one side filled with clothes that were clearly too large for me, which I assumed belonged to him. The other side held more feminine clothes, some of which I recognized as hers. Among them hung sensual evening wear she had never worn for me. It was now undeniable. Marcy and Jack were having an affair. I started to realize there was a side to her that she had kept hidden from me. It became clear that in her eyes, I had always been her second choice. What did my children know about all of this? Using my cell phone, I documented everything I had found. I made sure to include a shot of me holding one of his shirts in front of the mirror to show how oversized it was on me. A framed photo of him with his parents caught my attention. I meticulously recorded every detail of the room. Then, I stopped and saved the recording. Returning to the TV screen, I rewound the disc. As the camera zoomed in, I saw the joy in the man's eyes and recognized him as Jack Redding, my boss's son. This was the second video that I saved to collect the necessary evidence. I went downstairs to get our triple luggage and pack all my clothes. On a sudden impulse, I returned to the third floor to pick up the CD and put it in one of the suitcases near the front door. I planned to pick them up later. I had more pressing matters to attend to. I phoned my father to inquire about the timeline for opening the new store. He mentioned he was already constructing it, adding a second story for a 3-bedroom apartment. He also discussed hiring a regional manager to oversee its operations. The franchise we secured from the chain I work for will greatly assist us. The construction will take another month and a half to complete, followed by another month to set everything up. I'll be managing the store and living in the apartment, I informed my dad. Please find me a good civil attorney and one specializing in divorce. I'll fill you in on the details later. Later, I contacted the farmer from whom we bought the farm, asking if I could rent a room until the construction finished. He agreed to let me stay, insisting that my money wasn't necessary. Despite my attempts, he refused payment, feeling indebted to my family. I promised to arrive the next day. At 10 in the morning, I was at the transport center, sat in the boss's office, and informed him that I was quitting without the usual notice. He just had to ask me why, and I didn't like having to answer him at all. I showed him the video of the room as a whole, and then the photos I took later. The last framed photo showed his wife and himself with their son. "Heath, where did you get this?" Jace asked. I explained that this was the third floor of my house and it had not yet been planned to be completed. His face was as white as freshly fallen snow. Then I showed him a clip of Jack and my wife in bed, as if she belonged to him. Jace, a Christian, looked at it and said, "My God, this is disgusting." I said that the woman your son is having fun with is called Marcy. That's why I'm leaving. Marcy is my wife. This clip was created in a separate room on the third floor with the help of a third person. I didn't know what to think, so I said, "I'm sorry, but you see, because of your son's and my wife's behavior, I had no choice. I had to give up driving in order to get custody of my 2 daughters in the divorce." He contacted the accountant to prepare my final paycheck and include a $10,000 bonus due to my son's actions. "Keep this confidential and come to my office immediately." "Are the children his or yours?" Jace Redding asked gravely. "They both resemble Marcy. I believe they are hers, considering the affair hasn't been ongoing for long," I replied. "We've been hearing rumors for a while, Heath," Jace Redding said. "The only way to be sure is to get a DNA test done." "I recommend having your son Jack arrange it," I said sadly. "Please, don't mention this to anyone else. I want Marcy to discover on her own tonight that I'm aware of what's happening. Just so you know, Heath Cummings, I do not condone my son's actions. When he returns in 2 weeks, he's out. We've heard rumors for years that he was involved with a married woman, carrying on regularly behind her husband's back, but we never had proof. We thought he was just boasting to other drivers," Jace solemnly stated. "Now I regret deeply that he deceived a good man like you. I had no idea he had moved into your home," he continued. "But your jobs made it easy for this to go unnoticed for so long." I would later discover that Jace kept his promise. Not only did he dismiss his son, but he also disinherited him for bringing shame upon the family name by ruining another man's marriage. What Jace couldn't reconcile was that his own son had betrayed one of his long-trusted employees. It showed him that his son cared little for anyone or anything. After depositing the check, withdrawing all funds from our joint accounts, and settling my bill at Jameson's Auto, I went to my children's elementary school. After a lengthy conversation with the guidance counselor, my children were called out of class to meet with me. As she began to leave to give us privacy, I suggested she stay, explaining, "It's important to me not to be accused of manipulating our children." She asked if I was certain about my decision. I replied, "In this instance, yes, because my wife Marcy works as a social worker for the state." Ms. Connor looked visibly surprised. I discovered that their new Uncle Jake had been renting the upstairs apartment for 3 years. Initially keeping his distance, he gradually became integrated into the family. Marcy had introduced him as a distant cousin who had recently returned to the area. While they never caught them together, seeing Jake coming downstairs in the morning led them to assume he and their mother were involved romantically. "Linda told me Mom insisted we call him Uncle," one of my daughters recounted. I clarified to them directly that Jake was not related to either of us. My daughters' expressions revealed their shock. I explained that Jack had been their mother's long-term partner. Consequently, we were divorcing. Being a trucker, I couldn't realistically seek primary custody, so the children would remain with their mother until I found different work. Only then could I pursue sole custody through the courts. The school counselor confirmed my explanation. After kissing my daughters goodbye, I watched them head back to their 6th grade class. The counselor gave me her contact information. "Have your lawyer contact me for a statement on what I witnessed," she said. "I've seen too many married men get unfairly treated in divorce." I stopped at a flower shop and requested the most wilted bouquet, which I boxed up as a joke gift after explaining my intent. They fetched some discarded flowers from the trash, which I accepted. I placed them, along with a card my daughters had signed for Uncle Jake and her doll that I'd cut up, on our bed. I gathered the tools I wanted from our home, loading them into my truck along with suitcases, covering everything with a tarp and securing it tightly. These tools were valuable. John Sexsmith, a close friend and neighbor, approached and informed me, "You probably didn't know about Marcy's second husband, contrary to what we all believed." "Second husband?" I asked. "Yeah, they were together in a common law arrangement," John clarified. "No, I only found out about him today. Apparently it's been ongoing for at least 3 years. We used to work at the same company. I resigned today because I intend to seek sole custody of my daughters, and I need to demonstrate to the court that I can be there for them every day," I explained before continuing. "I had no way of knowing while I was at work since he wasn't there. He happens to be the boss's youngest son. His father learned today, the hard way, about the situation when I walked in and quit on him suddenly." We continued our conversation, and he suggested I move my truck from the driveway into his garage. His idea was that observing her tonight might offer me insight into how to plan for what would come later. "You can wake up before dawn and leave in the early morning darkness." I pondered his proposal for a few minutes before agreeing. I'm glad I did. I watched as my wife of 13 years pulled into the driveway. It seemed her car had been at the shop for servicing. She hurried into the bedroom to change out of her work clothes. Her reaction was priceless when she saw what lay on our bed. She smiled, thinking it was a surprise gift from Jack. Peering through the binoculars, I captured the joyous smile on her face up close. She glanced at the kid's card for Uncle Jake and set it aside. She reached for the baby doll, only to discover it shattered into pieces. It had been a favorite of hers since she bought it for Jack, wearing it when she wanted him to take her seriously. Why would he do this? Now her expression turned to concern. Why had Jack placed it in Heath's room? I could see doubt creeping into her features. She brushed off the remaining flower box pieces and opened it. The strong scent of 24 decayed red roses caught her off guard. She seemed on the verge of vomiting for a moment. I could see she hadn't realized I had already discovered the truth. Her confused expression indicated she didn't understand what Jack was attempting to convey. I thought perhaps she believed Jack was ending their relationship. I observed as my two daughters stepped off the bus and headed towards the front door. Lauren texted me, advising not to answer if you call, but to listen silently. We felt it was important for her to hear the truth, as you taught us. I briefed our neighbor John on what was about to occur. When I turn on speaker, we need to remain quiet, I explained, so both of us can hear. The girls went directly to their mother's room, where she was still grappling with what I had done. She still hadn't grasped the message I had sent. After greeting their mother in the usual manner, my daughters began to speak. Dad pulled us out of class today because he wanted to talk to us privately, Linda began. I could tell from her expression that she had captured their mother's attention. We were taken to the school counselor's office. We were confused about why he was there. You had told us he would be home around 6. Then he asked Ms. Connor to stay, Lauren added. The first thing he asked us was about Uncle Jack and how long he's been part of the household. I explained that he's a distant cousin of yours who moved back into the area, Linda told her. I saw the fear spread across Marcy's face. Now she knew who had left the message on the bed. Dad didn't know that you had finished the 3rd floor while he was away. You told us it was supposed to be a surprise for him, Lauren revealed. Now we realize it wasn't. We kept our promise not to tell your secret, and it was quite a shock for Dad, Linda added. He told us he only found out it was finished today, Lauren said. Mom, you taught us not to lie, but now we understand that it's okay for you to lie to everyone in the family. Marcy burst into tears, the tears streaming down her face. Dad didn't know that Uncle Jack had been renting the 3rd floor from us for over 3 years, Linda stated. We had to explain to him that while he was away, you never slept in the bed that you and Dad used when he was home. We knew because it was never made up before you left for work, Lauren pointed out. Marcy turned pale. Her daughters had exposed her due to her actions. Even the smallest details, like ensuring the bed was made, now weighed heavily against her. Marcy had always insisted that her girls make their beds before beginning their day. We confessed to Dad that we never actually caught you with Uncle Jack, Lauren explained. But we did see you coming downstairs regularly from the 3rd floor in the mornings when he wasn't home. Dad told us he was divorcing you because Jack isn't a relative. He's your mother's longtime lover. You've been hiding from him, Linda added. He said you've been using him for a long time to support Jack and your mother's lifestyle, not for our benefit. He feels his life with you has been a lie. He said we'll have to live with you until he finds a new job. He quit today because he wants custody of us. Later, Ms. Connor explained that Dad had to quit his job because the court wouldn't grant custody to a long-distance truck driver. Linda continued. After he said goodbye, we returned to class. Marcy sat on the bed, tears streaming down her face, struggling to maintain composure. She knew the girls were right. Heath was preparing himself for the upcoming battle, making the necessary moves. As a social worker, Marcy understood what the state would scrutinize when the court mandated their evaluation. We ended up breaking down, so the school counselor had to pull us out of class for the rest of the day, Linda recounted. We had a long conversation with her trying to calm us down. We learned that sleeping with another man while married is adultery, Mom, Lauren interjected. Ms. Connor said it's the ultimate insult to a married couple. It seems like you're not even bothered, otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation, Linda pointed out. Ms. Connor wondered why you thought you could live with 2 husbands for so long. I don't have 2 husbands, just Heath and a live-in partner, Marcy muttered to herself, realizing how others perceived it. Heath, blinded by his pride, had no choice but to file for divorce. In his eyes, Marcy had manipulated him, treating him like a fool. Linda and I discussed your affair extensively and concluded that you must not only hate Dad, but us too, for us to understand why you did what you did for so long, Lauren declared. Ms. Connor said no one who truly loved or respected their spouse would do what you did to our father, Linda added. Marcy was in such distress that her body trembled with her sobs. She never anticipated being caught or facing her daughter's direct confrontation. Their words were sharp and pierced her deeply. Her actions had compelled her daughters to mature prematurely. Just before we boarded the bus, Ms. Connor asked if we were emotionally all right to ride. She offered to drive us home if not, Linda recounted. I assured her we would manage because the bus ride would give us a chance to talk. Ms. Connor told us she would testify about what she heard today if needed in court. She said she had no choice, having seen too many lives ruined by false accusations, added Lauren. We whispered a lot on the bus and made some decisions on our own, Linda continued. Marcy completely broke down, burying her face in her hands. Mom, we're only 12, but soon we'll be old enough to choose where we want to live. Ms. Connor explained that at 13 we can decide for ourselves, and we choose Dad, Lauren declared firmly. We're going to call Grandma to pick us up. I'm sure she'll let us stay until Dad sorts things out. That way you and Jack can have the house to yourselves, Lauren said to her sister. Come on, let's call Grandma and pack. Mother, one last thing. Were you encouraging us to bond with Uncle Jake so we'd accept him as your second husband without Dad knowing? Linda asked. Because that's how it seemed to both of us. Marcy was devastated. She sat there crying as her daughter went downstairs to call her mother, who lived across town. Her daughters possessed their father's natural insight. They approached everything logically and drew their own conclusions. I messaged Marcy saying, "What you found on the bed was my doing. Inform your common-law husband that I will sue him for financial support for you and the 2 children." Through binoculars, I observed Marcy coming to the realization that exposing her lifestyle, relationships, lies, and concealment to the court would strip her of all rights regarding her daughters. Marcy understood she had been defeated. There was no positive outcome possible. My lawsuit against Heath and the exposure of Jack would ruin them both. John and I timed it perfectly. In less than 15 minutes, my in-laws arrived. John opened his front door just to check if their voices would carry. They did. Voices so loud they might have been screaming. My mother-in-law severely criticized Marcy when she walked her granddaughters to the front door. However, it was my father-in-law who brought clarity that left no doubt about his feelings about his daughter's predicament. I believe that once you cut Heath out of your life, you will look for another trucker to take his place. As soon as everything is settled between you and Jack, my father-in-law said, seething with anger. Jack has already shown how little he respects you by tolerating your relationships with other people. Your actions clearly show that one man will never satisfy your desires. John and I could see that Marcy was overwhelmed by her father's words. She was crying so hard that she couldn't speak. Tomorrow we will contact the custody service to discuss further steps, said Marcy's mother. It was our granddaughters who contacted us and explained why they wanted to leave this house. I am very proud of them. Obviously, someone raised them well, although, unfortunately, we can't say the same about you. John closed the door, went into the kitchen, and got a couple of bottles of cold beer. I followed him. Your daughters have assessed the situation correctly, Heath. You should be proud, John remarked. Honestly, when the construction crew was working, Marcy informed us that you needed money and were planning to rent out the 3rd floor. The house and land were fully paid for. We were just taking our time because we didn't need to rush, I explained. I had renovated the entire house from the ground floor up. So she deceived us from the very beginning. Jack and she had everything planned out. Where did the money come from then? John asked. We haven't received a single cent of income from that so-called rental suite since day one, I said. I assume it came from Jack's trust fund and he must have reimbursed it. I took out my cell phone, found Marcy's contact, and tapped text. John, let me know if you spot Marcy. I want to send a text and hear her response. A couple of minutes later, he reported that he had retrieved her and she was back in her bedroom, appearing to have calmed down. I mentioned that I had sent the message. It was brief. Hey, to all who are concerned, Jace Redding and I want clarification on whether Linda and Lauren belong to Jack or me due to the length of your relationship with his son. Jace intends to pursue legal action to resolve this. Oh my God, she's completely lost it. She threw her phone against the wall, John exclaimed. Now she's lying face down on her bed, crying hysterically. John returned to the kitchen with a smile. What exactly did you text her? I simply asked if Linda and Lauren were Jack's or mine, I replied. Jace mentioned rumors circulating for years about his son being involved with a married woman whose husband was unaware. So I posed a question that needs clarification for everyone involved. John Smith's expression turned pale. He understood the seriousness of the Redding family's reputation. Jace would not hesitate to pursue the matter to the highest court to uncover the truth. I waited 30 minutes before requesting John to check on Marcy again. She was now sitting on the living room sofa. I sent her a 5-minute clip of her performance, which I recorded from the TV screen, accidentally showing the man she was with, good old Uncle Jack. When she was asked who filmed it, I waited a bit and then answered, I took the disc. Maybe I'll find out when I watch it. John noticed. Marcy is not herself again. I don't want to go into details, but she threw up right on the living room carpet. I left at 5 in the morning, sending what I had recorded the day before to everyone we knew, friends or enemies, accompanied by the text. This is what I showed Jace Redding when he asked me why I had to quit. The second video was also shot on the same floor in a bedroom with someone's help. The neighbors openly say that Jack Redding is Marcy's second husband. Marcy told them that I agreed to this, but it's not true. I found out about it yesterday. I plan to file for divorce and sue Jack Redding for various reasons. For most of them, it wasn't the best start to the day. I stopped at a truck stop on the outskirts of town and ordered a trucker's breakfast. My truck was parked right next to the window where I was sitting. I'm sorry, Heath, no man deserves what happened to you, said Maureen, Marcy's younger sister. Do you mind if I join you? I nodded, and she sat down across from me. I took a slow sip of the hot coffee. Mom and Dad informed me last night. The girls spilled everything once they got home. Just so you're aware, we were all caught off guard by this, Maureen explained. Please let us know if you change your phone number so we won't pass it on to Marcy. The number will remain the same, Maureen, I replied. I had already planned to quit in 2 months anyway because my girls are growing up and I want to be home with them in the evenings during their active teenage years. What was my sister thinking? Maureen muttered. There's no way you'd ever agree to Marcy having a second husband. I don't think we'll ever understand, I said. Maybe it started innocently as a friendship, but it went places it shouldn't have. Either way, she seemed to be enjoying it from what I gather. Apparently, it's been going on much longer than the 3 years we just found out about. What do you mean? Maureen asked. Jace Redding, when I explained why I was quitting, mentioned rumors about his youngest son being involved with a married woman for years, I explained. He asked if Linda and Lauren were Jack's. Oh, shit. Who else knows? She asked. I showed Marcy my text messages, letting her read what I had sent her last night and this morning. As she finished reading, tears welled up in her eyes. What she had feared was bad had turned out to be even worse. The video showed that their relationship involved another person. By the end of the day, everyone will know, I told her. Jace is going public to find out the truth. It might turn out that neither of us is the biological father of any of them. Maureen must have noticed the tears in my eyes because she stood up and moved to sit beside me, holding my hand in silence until the waitress took our order. Eventually, I had to let go of her hand to eat. Heath and Marcy had married young, at 19. She had been the youngest bridesmaid and had always been infatuated with him. Even then, she had found him handsome, a quality he still possessed. Heath drove long distances as a trucker so Marcy could attend university. After she graduated and began working for the state, she chose a location close to her hometown, not realizing until now that it was to be near her first love, Jack, whom their parents had never approved of. Maureen looked at Heath and sensed he might struggle to cope with this revelation. When Heath was at home, she devoted as much of her free time to spending it with him. Heath was a sincere man who always treated her as his equal. Whenever she faced difficulties, he was the person she turned to. He taught her to consider situations from all perspectives, which helped her turn major problems into minor ones. Falling in love with him came naturally to her. His standards were so high that every suitor she encountered afterward had to measure up. Although her parents wanted her to marry, Maureen couldn't confess that her heart belonged to someone else and always had. Heath was a faithful man who never looked at another woman. For now, she just needed to figure out a way to keep Heath in her life. When the time was right, she planned to make her move and prove to him that he should have chosen her instead of her sister. "Heath, do you know where you'll be living?" Maureen asked. Linda and Lauren asked Mom and Dad if they could stay with them. They're upset and determined but proud of their father. "The girls told Mom and Dad they want to live with you," she continued. "Mom and Dad explained to them that you're doing what's best for the long term. I can bring them to you on weekends so you can see them if you'd like." I opened my notes and gave her the address of the farm. "I mentioned that my father and I have begun constructing a gas station and convenience store near this area," I explained. "I'll be residing with the tenant who currently leases our farm. Before I can give you an answer, I need to consult with them. We're also adding a spacious 3-bedroom apartment above, which will serve as my residence." "Why there?" Maureen inquired. "We own 10 acres on both sides of the intersection," I clarified, "which we plan to develop and eventually sell as 3/4-acre lots. Should we require more space, we can expand into the farm. Given the lack of amenities in the vicinity, the store will cater to many and serve as a focal point." "How did you come across it?" Maureen asked. "According to Google Maps, there's nothing nearby." "I was taking a shortcut to save time," I elaborated, due to heavy traffic on the main road. I spotted a sign at a 4-way stop and followed it. The traffic patterns suggest good potential for the business. After finishing our meal, I grabbed the check. Maureen leaned over and gave me her customary kiss on the cheek, which always brought a smile to my face. "Keep this in mind, Heath," Maureen said. "There are many of us who have always admired you for the person you are." Later, while driving, I called my father and filled him in on everything. He assured me he would find one of the best divorce lawyers available. I checked the mileage. It was only 75 miles to my destination. I arrived at the construction site just after 8:30. Seeing it made me smile because Dad had gone all out. There were 8 pumps for vehicles ranging from passenger cars to small trucks, and 2 for the big rigs off to the right. The foundation had been dug, and the blocks were framed for the spillage collection system in case the tanks ever leaked. The concrete floors needed steel support. Inside the construction trailer, I examined Dad's plans. They resembled his others, but this one had a 2,400-square-foot apartment on top. It pleased me because it showed he recognized the area's potential. After approximately 2 hours, I made my way to the farm. Bill Robinson came out to greet me, admiring my restored old Ford truck. It was a time when speed, durability, and rugged metal reigned supreme. The Mrs., as Bill affectionately called her, was just about to serve lunch and insisted I join. She prepared a hearty farmer's meal and was delighted by how much I ate. Afterward, I pitched in to help clean up. While she packed away leftovers, I tackled the dishes. She noticed I wasn't wearing a wedding ring anymore. By the time we finished and she brewed a fresh pot of coffee, I had recounted the events of the past 2 days. Bill mentioned that the girls and their aunt would be welcome to visit any time. He looked forward to having youngsters around again, someone to grill for. I messaged Maureen, suggesting she visit every Friday night and return home Sunday, to which she eagerly agreed. On Thursday afternoon, I reviewed the disk on my laptop. Unfortunately, it didn't reveal any additional information. Using my cell phone as a Wi-Fi hotspot, I sent my father everything, including Ms. Connor's address and phone number. I instructed him to contact Jace Redding to determine Jack's whereabouts and arrange for his legal papers to be served promptly. Marcy could be served at the social services office in town. Additionally, I uploaded the video file from the disk. In sheer spite, I messaged Macy to let her know I had watched the entire video and remarked it wasn't particularly impressive. There had been more captivating performances by other women. Maureen, a tax specialist, was fortunate it was the slow season. Once the girls were out of school, they hit the road. Maureen chuckled as they texted their father every 10 to 15 minutes. The 75-mile drive seemed to pass quickly. Upon arriving at the construction site, they sent one final text. Driving down the road, they spotted him waiting at the end of the driveway. Linda and Lauren dashed out of Maureen's car and into my embrace. Bill and his wife were introduced. I finally learned her name was Betty. The girls were thrilled with the rooms Betty had prepared for them. Bill had shown everyone their rooms while Betty finished preparing a lavish dinner. After dinner, I started cleaning up while Betty watched as my daughters and I washed the dishes so she could put them away. Bill excitedly told the girls about the large swing set, the swimming pond, and the small motorcycles they could learn to ride with my permission. I had been worried about activities, but Bill and Betty had everything planned out. After the kids were in bed, Maureen and I finally had a chance to talk. "Heath, it's been a tumultuous couple of days," Maureen said. "Everything's fallen apart. Jack was the boy she used to sneak out to see when we were growing up. That's how long they've been involved." "That explains a lot," I replied. "I was the safe and secure choice. Jack represented the wild side she secretly craved. She didn't realize he knew it, and he used it to his advantage. Jack will run off and leave Marcy with nothing she deserves. Mom and Dad spoke with child services. If you give them written permission, they can keep the kids until you find a place," Maureen explained. They also spoke with the kids privately, and afterwards we were informed that due to Marcy's lifestyle, they couldn't recommend granting her custody. Maureen glanced at me, seeing tears streaming down my face. It finally hit me. I told her to leave so I could sort things out, but she refused and stayed by my side. Marcy sat at the kitchen table, reflecting on the past 2 days. Thursday had been quiet, but today had been anything but. Jace Redding had served her legal papers at work, taking her to court. He wanted to establish a direct DNA link between her daughters and himself. The truth was, it had been so many years since the twins were conceived that she could barely remember. Heath had warned her that this battle was coming, but after the initial shock, she had dismissed it as his anger. What really hit her hard was Heath's text message to all their friends and family. She had never seen Jack as her second husband, but legally, as she learned from her lawyer today, he was. The day she moved Jack into her house marked the beginning of their common-law relationship. According to the law, after the first year, they had the same legal rights as a married couple. As a result, Heath was destined to succeed in his lawsuit against Jack. The only uncertainty was the amount of compensation he would receive. The lawyer indicated that Heath would receive favorable treatment in divorce court due to enduring unjust treatment for a prolonged period. If she had collected rent over the past 3 years and could prove it with monthly bank statements, the situation might have been different. However, there was no evidence that he contributed to household expenses. Consequently, the court viewed him as financially dependent. The bombshell dropped just before closing. Her supervisor summoned her to the office and outlined everything. After hours on Thursday, she had visited Mr. and Mrs. Klaus Rubenstein regarding a custody issue at their request. They recounted the previous night's events and sought guidance from the state. After speaking with the children, I informed the grandparents that if they obtained written permission from the father, we would recognize them as having temporary custody until the case is resolved. "I understand they are your parents," her supervisor explained. "Marcy, I can't relocate you right now, but I will as soon as there's an opening. I can't terminate your employment, but your credibility as a social worker in this area is compromised. Your duties will now be restricted to office work, and you must transfer your current cases to others," she concluded with disdain. Marcy realized she had only herself to hold accountable. It was her decision, solely hers, to persist in pursuing Jack. Now she was beginning to grasp the repercussions of our actions. Saturday had been bustling with Linda and Lauren all geared up. It was amusing to hear him instruct my daughters on the do's and don'ts of the small motorcycles they stood beside. Watching them take to it was truly remarkable. After 2 hours, Bill decided to call it a day, foreseeing their bodies would soon ache and stiffen. Noticing their sweatiness, he suggested, "Go take a quick dip in the pond." Betty and Maureen were growing closer. By around 4 o'clock, the girls were summoned to help prepare part of dinner. I kept an eye on them, as it was unfamiliar territory for them. The 4 ladies sat at the kitchen table chopping onions for 2 dishes and peeling hot boiled potatoes for potato salad. Bill fired up his barbecue to cook the steaks he had thawed. I pitched in where I could. We enjoyed the steaks, potato salad, and baked beans outdoors at the picnic table. It was intriguing that neither the TV nor their cell phones had been touched all day. It seemed like the twins were uncovering a whole new world. It was the girls themselves who opted to turn in early due to exhaustion. The 4 of us relaxed over a few beers, playing cards until we called it a night. On Sunday after lunch, they headed home. Maureen had in hand a handwritten letter, witnessed by Billy and Betty, granting them the necessary permissions. Early Monday morning, Klaus Rubenstein called to express his gratitude for promptly returning the letter. He had personally delivered it to the office, where the supervisor made copies for their records and issued a legal notice confirming their status as legal guardians of their granddaughters. We delved into the history of his daughter and Jack. In the process, I discovered a lot I hadn't known before. The next Friday morning, Jake Redding was in Austin, Texas, picking up a shipment of sterilized medical equipment, when he was served legal papers. Around the same time, Marcy Cummings received similar documents shortly after the social services office opened. Later, I received a text from Maureen asking for my waist measurements. Curious, I inquired why, and she replied that it was for a swimming trip with the kids at the pond. I texted back my measurement, 34 inches. During an early afternoon walk, my phone buzzed with notifications. It was a text from Marcy, asking if I had calmed down enough to talk. I replied, recounting everything I knew about her relationship history, from sneaking out to meet someone to her current situation. I questioned why, if this person had always been her true love, she had married me. Unsurprisingly, I received no further response. Later, when Maureen arrived with the kids, we were all excited. Maureen looked stunning, her smile infectious. After greeting me with a hug, the girls quietly asked a question, to which I agreed, on the condition that they also consented. As they went to greet Bill and Betty, Maureen surprised me with a firm kiss on the lips. I reminded her to listen to the girls, and we turned towards them. Somehow, she slipped her hand into mine. "We were wondering," Lauren began, "if it would be okay for us to call you Grandpa and Grandma?" Linda added. We happily agreed, but what moved us was Betty's tearful reaction. Later, we learned that they hadn't been able to have children, making this simple request something she had longed to hear all her life. After dinner, I informed Maureen that both Marcy and Jack Redding had been served. Then I showed her the latest message from Marcy in my reply. "My sister can't justify her actions," Maureen remarked, "because if she did, she'd have to face the truth about herself." "Forget about your sister, Maureen," I retorted. "When will you find a man who can love you as you deserve?" "Don't be surprised, but I already have," she replied. "My challenge is making him see it." Bill and I were early risers, so we sat outside enjoying freshly brewed coffee in the morning. "Heath, Betty is my second wife," Bill disclosed. "I was first married to her sister, who treated me as badly as Marcy treated you." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Don't let your pain blind you. Maureen has been there for you from day one. When you're ready, ask yourself why." That's when I began to understand. Maureen was my best friend. Did she want something more? And if so, why? Bill, how did you realize Betty was interested in you? I inquired. A cast-iron frying pan over my head, he chuckled. After she caught a neighbor girl flirting with me. Since we couldn't have our own children, we fostered kids for years. Our conversation ended abruptly as the rest of the household woke up and voices filled the air. After the twins had been riding motorcycles for 3 hours, we all decided it was time to go for a swim. Bill and Betty brought out the deck chairs to watch us play with a beach ball. Maureen looked amazing in her swimsuit. Her brown hair was combed behind her ears. The pond turned out to be deeper than expected. It was fed by a small stream and was bordered by railroad ties. It even had its own miniature waterfall. Our first beach volleyball game was adults against children, then 2 girls against us. For the 4 of us, it was a time of laughter, sarcasm, and pure fun. A moment when we were just ourselves. Each of my daughters took turns diving under the water, and I lifted her onto my shoulders. Eventually, Bill and Betty announced that they were starting to cook dinner, and Linda and Lauren went to help them. I dived under the water and playfully turned Maureen over, making her laugh when she surfaced with wet hair. Then she moved closer to me. Looking into her eyes, I saw something new. Without saying a word, I bent down when she raised her head to me. Our first kiss was filled with such love as I had never felt for Marcy. Wow, I breathed. That was so strong. Maureen smiled and answered quietly, "You have no idea how long I've been waiting for this." She moved closer, allowing me to hug her tightly. Finally, we reluctantly broke away from each other when Bill shouted that dinner would be ready in 20 minutes. We ended things and went back to change for dinner. As soon as we walked into the house, Betty knew. "Looks like things are starting to fall into place. How did you let him know?" Betty asked, grinning broadly. "She didn't. I spilled the beans to Heath about your impressive skills with the cast-iron frying pan," Bill replied with a chuckle. "The twins overheard him and insisted on hearing the story of how you 2 got together." It was after dinner, once the twins had gone to bed. The fresh country air had tired them out. I sat on the back porch on a cushioned swing when Maureen joined me. I put my arm around her as she leaned in and said, "Mom figured it out when I brought the twins home last week. Apparently, I seemed happier than I had in years. I guess my poker face wasn't as good as I thought." "How did she react?" I asked. "I imagine there must have been some concern, given everything that's going on." "She asked if things had progressed to the point of being serious," Maureen said. I honestly told her no. Then she asked how long I'd been in love with him. I said since the summer before they got married. "Wow, that long, and it takes all this for me to notice," I mused. "I was expecting a big lecture from her," Maureen continued, "but all she said was, if it works out, she'll get Dad to accept it." Then she explained that our dad had been her older sister's cast-off. She's grateful to her every day for that. As I said goodbye to Maureen with a kiss on Sunday afternoon, Lauren remarked to a shocked Linda that Aunt Maureen had loved Dad for years. It took Mom's actions for Dad to realize it. If Maureen has her way, they'll marry as soon as his divorce is final. Later, as we drove away, I wondered how Lauren knew. "Heath," Bill said, "let's take a walk. I have an idea to discuss." We strolled from the front of the property to the road, crossing a bridge over a small creek. Bill pointed out a perfect spot for a house, suggesting it for Lauren and Linda to visit for bike rides or horseback riding. "Whose idea was this?" I asked. "Betty and Maureen's early this morning," he chuckled. "They plan to spring it on you next week." On Monday morning, Klaus called me urgently. Jace Redding had obtained a court order for Lauren and Linda to undergo paternity testing. I had to explain what I knew. Klaus was devastated by the possibility of paternity questions, having believed Marcy was faithful for the past 3 years. In his distress, he went to social services and publicly disowned his daughter, declaring her dead to him in front of everyone. I spoke with my mother-in-law, who informed me that Ms. Connor had told her she provided a notarized statement to my lawyer. Jack is returning to town on Wednesday. Do you think you should be here to see what's happening? You could stay here. I told her I would consider it. I called John Sexsmith to ask if I could stay at his place on Tuesday night. He agreed because he wanted to share some things with me. Bill suggested I take his car so it wouldn't be recognized. I agreed, on the condition that he take the truck and treat his wife to a day out. He chuckled and said, "You're pretty sharp for a young guy." It was dusk when I arrived in town. I called John to confirm he was home before pulling into his driveway. It appeared Marcy had been entertaining another man regularly since I'd been away. He was there at that moment. Looking through John's binoculars, I immediately recognized him as Jack's older married brother, Jace Redding. Jace Redding was surprised to hear from me. I told him I needed to meet with him and gave him my address. When he arrived, I handed him the key to my house, urging him to see it for himself. I revealed that I had discovered who was secretly filming Jack and Marcy. They were currently together in the third-floor bedroom. John and I watched as Jace walked towards my front door and entered using the key. "What do you think he'll do when he finds out?" John asked. "Jace Redding is a proud man. It depends on what his pride drives him to do," I replied. "I just hope it doesn't push him over the edge." We were sitting in the kitchen when the sound of a gunshot startled us. Fear gripped us instantly. John dialed 911. When the police, fire department, and an ambulance arrived, we went outside to watch. John and I couldn't help but laugh. It seemed absurd to see Marcy half-dressed and Jason's brother, Jack, in handcuffs. Our amusement turned to concern when we saw Jace Redding being carried out on a stretcher. John took out his police scanner and tuned in. We found out that Jace had broken into the third-floor bedroom, and Jason had shot him, mistaking him for a burglar. Jace was being taken to the hospital with a shoulder injury. We stepped outside again and caught Marcy's attention, now dressed. Her face turned pale when she saw me across the street. Things had clearly gone from bad to worse for her. John remarked to me, "I can't believe she was involved with both brothers." I replied, "I knew there was someone else, but I didn't know who." I felt sorry for Jace. He didn't deserve what happened. No one does. At 6 on Wednesday morning, I pulled up to my in-laws' place. Klaus Rubenstein was already up and greeted me warmly. Over coffee, I shared with him what had transpired the previous night before anyone else was awake. Rose, his wife, was surprised to see me but hugged me tightly. Soon my daughters came downstairs, eager to see me. I drove them to school before returning to Klaus and Rose's home. Klaus had left for work, so Rose and I had a heartfelt conversation about her daughters. We both concluded that Marcy had never truly loved me at all. I visited Jace Redding, who was resting with his wife by his side. When I met her, she stood and became emotional as I embraced her. Jace overheard me comforting her about their children's actions, assuring her not to blame herself. Jace smiled and remarked, "Heath has always been resilient. I've never seen him lose his cool." "I've come close a few times," I admitted. "I always feared if I lost it, I might hurt someone." Jace chuckled. "Jason's in jail. Jack's facing bankruptcy after losing his trust. We're unsure about Jason's wife's next move. It's a real mess. And then there's you. Any interest in returning to management?" I declined, explaining that I had adopted a new outlook on life. I went to the transportation center and observed as Jack checked in and out for the last time. Jace had informed me he would arrive around 1 o'clock. It was quite amusing to see him drive away in anger. Knowing his quick temper, I called John Sexsmith to watch my house because I anticipated trouble. Maureen was just closing up for the night when the receptionist entered her office. "There's a well-dressed man asking for you. He's holding a dozen red roses," she said. "He wants to know if you'd like to go out for dinner." Curious, Maureen followed her out, wondering who it could be. Any doubts I had about Maureen's feelings vanished when she saw me. The tears welling up in her eyes said it all. I followed her to her apartment, and after she parked, we went to Outback for their steak and shrimp special. We enjoyed their blooming onion while having a couple of cocktails. Just as we finished our meal, John called. Jack had already reached home before Marcy and waited for her. The alcohol he drank while waiting only fueled his anger. With his father in the hospital, brother in jail, and having just lost his job, he blamed Marcy for everything. He waited with a gun in hand when she entered. A neighbor, hearing gunshots, called the police repeatedly. Marcy was badly injured and rushed to the emergency room. John said her condition was critical. I informed Maureen, who contacted her parents. We met them at the hospital. 6 hours later, we learned she had died during surgery due to severe internal bleeding. I called Bill and his wife to update them and let them know I'd be returning Bill's vehicle on Friday and picking up my truck. Telling the twins about their mother's death was difficult. Klaus and I decided on a closed casket as we selected one. It was sobering to realize that one person's actions had changed 11 lives forever. People often fail to consider the consequences of their actions. After we left the cemetery, Klaus pulled me aside. "Heath, there's no connection between Jace Redding and the children," Klaus said quietly. "More importantly, how long has Maureen been in love with you?" "Since the summer before Marcy and I got married," I replied, recalling what Klaus's wife had told me. "Did she also mention that her sister left me 35 years ago?" Klaus said. "I'm still thankful she did. If you and Maureen work things out, you've got my support." That was the moment I began to rebuild my life. It's been 5 years. I watch Linda and Lauren waiting for the bus. Maureen, my wife, keeps busy with our 2 young boys. Bill and Betty have embraced their roles as adoring grandparents. The gas station and convenience store have become the heart of our small community, now with its own post office. In the warmer months, I enjoy walking from the house we built by the pond to work. Jace Redding and his wife visit frequently. His eldest son's ex-wife resides here with their children. Jack received a 10 to 25-year sentence for involuntary manslaughter. Jason's charge was reduced to a misdemeanor. As for the name of our little corner of the world, it originated when Bill painted a sign that read, "We are all here because of circumstances," and placed it at the crossroads.